So you might have seen that changes to ISA rules are back on the agenda for Rachel Reeves ahead of the budget on the 26th of November 2025. So should you be worried about this? Is there anything you need to do now? Is there any truth amongst this rumours and speculation? Well, I'm going to break down for you what's being said and if this comes along, what that might actually mean for you. So first of all, it's worth going back a little bit because the first rumours we had about changes to specifically the cash ISA began in February this year. And I covered it back then, but it's worth just talking about that again because the talk then was about completely scrapping cash ISAs altogether. And then as the months went on, it kind of changed and started looking at actually maybe the cash ISA allowance would be reduced to $4,000, maybe $5,000. And they thought, right, there was a speech that the Chancellor did in July, the Mansion House speech. It was all set to be announced then. This is what's going to be changing with cash ISAs. But you're probably not surprised to know that there was a bit of a backlash to these ideas, let alone the scrapping it. Even just reducing the allowance was not seen as something that would be a good idea for a huge number of reasons. So the announcement that was set to happen, it wasn't confirmed it was going to happen, but everyone thought this is going to happen this date, was cancelled. But that didn't mean that changes were cancelled. It just meant they didn't say in July, this is what we want to do with ISAs going forward. And it just simply seems that Reeves has liked the idea of ISA reform. That it's something that is going to be quite key to her plans for growth, economic growth here in the UK. So paused, we'll see what happens. The only thing that was confirmed, and of course, things can always change, but was confirmed, was that the overall £20,000 ISA allowance across all the different ISAs wouldn't change. Because remember, this annual amount of new money you can put into ISAs doesn't just cover cash ISAs, it also covers stocks and shares ISAs, innovative finance ISAs, and lifetime ISAs. Collectively, the whole group of those, you can't put more than £20,000 into them. And that is going to stay. Just a side note, it's worth reminding you as well that the lifetime ISA allowance is a subset to that. It's £4,000 within that 20. But overall, all the money, that has been told that is going to stay. Then it went quiet. Didn't really hear too much over the rest of the summer into autumn. But last week, the Financial Times reported a new rumour, resurfacing things that we kind of heard in the past. Good news is the idea of scrapping cash ISAs doesn't seem to be back on the agenda. But that reduction on the annual allowance of new money that can go into the cash ISA specifically does look like that is back on the agenda. Again, with all these things, it's worth saying these are still rumours, still speculation. I'm sure the FT was close to someone who gave some very good information on this, but we don't know for certain because nothing has been announced for certain. Things can always change. But this is what the Financial Times is reporting, that cash ISA allowance would reduce to £10,000 a year for new deposits added in to ISAs. That represents a 50% cut. If it goes ahead, you'd imagine it would work similar then to how the lifetime ISA works, where a separate sub-limit within that overall 20,000. So if you did fill up the full £10,000 of rumoured allowance for cash ISAs, you'd still have another 10k to put towards the other ISAs, whether that's lifetime ISAs, stocks and shares ISAs, whatever it might be, but you couldn't put more than that 10k of cash in. So that is kind of where we're standing on this particular rumour. Now, the reason behind this is worth talking about as well, because it seems to be that the purpose for reducing the cash ISA allowance is to encourage more people to use that money, which would have gone into a cash ISA, and instead put it into a stocks and shares ISA. The logic, or the theory at least, is that at the moment, too much money is held in cash at the detriment of investments. And if you invest more, then there are two benefits. This at least is what the theory seems to be coming from the Treasury. One of those is economic growth. Obviously very, very keen to grow the economy, because if they do grow the economy and generate more from that, then there's less needs for cuts and stuff elsewhere. And the other thing would be over time, that if you invest, you get a better return than keeping your money in cash over the long term. Of course, there's no guarantee of that. Whenever people talk about investments, you'll hear them say past performance is no indication of future performance. But broadly speaking, the idea would be, at least this is what is coming from the rumours at least, it's a win-win. Win for the economy and win for consumers as well. Now, there's obviously a lot of debate about whether that actually would happen, because if you're currently someone who saves into a cash ISA, you might not want to put money into a stocks and shares ISA instead. You might just put your money in a normal savings account and therefore potentially pay more tax on it. So it doesn't necessarily mean just because you can't put money into the cash ISA that you suddenly put it in the stocks and shares ISA, does it? So that's one of the things that, doesn't necessarily mean that is going to happen. And also another big sort of consequence, if they were to make this change, is a lot of the backlash has come from the building societies, because they in particular say that if less money goes into cash ISAs, that means there's less money that they've got to help fund things like mortgages and savings rates for their customers. And a lot of that money does come from people putting money into cash ISAs, which in turn would push up mortgage rates. But anyway, that's kind of the theory behind why they want to do this cash ISA change. There's also another rumour that's come up over the weekend as well. There's still linked with ISAs, but more on the stocks and share side of things. Because, okay, if they're going down this logic that you're going to take money, which would have been in cash ISAs, and now invest it, just investing it in the stock market doesn't mean that's going to help the UK economy, because the stock market is worldwide, or at least it can be, of course, depends how you invest. So it looks like as well, there are rumours at least that the British ISA, or at least the idea of the British ISA, could also be coming back. Now, you might remember this was about a year and a half ago, I think, the then Treasurer the then Chancellor, of the Treasury, Jeremy Hunt, so former Conservative government, he announced this introduction of this British ISA, which was set to be an additional £5,000 allowance, but only for investing in UK stocks and shares, UK equities. And that was going to be happening, but then when Labour came in, they scrapped the idea. So it's not going to work. And there were lots of practical reasons why this possibly wouldn't work as well. But it looks like that general idea of how do we make people, if we're going to try and get them to invest more, either by pushing them into it or just other kind of incentives, how do we get them to do that in the UK stock market? So the rumours, say in this FT report, FT again reporting on this at the weekend, was that there could well be an additional allowance within the stocks and shares ISAs itself. So a requirement that a percentage of stocks and shares you buy have to be in the UK. Again, how you actually police that and how you manage that, I don't know. But that's kind of the idea. And the incentive that seems to be going on behind this is that there would be a stamp duty break on shares that fulfill this criteria. Stamp duty at the moment is 0.5%. So that will give you, again, a small amount, but actually over a long time and small amounts, that can really add up. So that's the other change that could be coming. And if that does happen, obviously that will be quite a fundamental change to how stocks and shares ISAs work themselves. Again, it's worth reiterating that these are just rumours right now. We don't know if anything will happen at all, and we don't know if those two changes in particular will be ones that come through. But it does seem, at least in my opinion, that there will be something. The amount, this hasn't gone away. Back at the beginning of the year when this first started, the idea came from city bosses who proposed it to the Treasury, and obviously they would stand to gain a lot from scrapping cash ISAs completely or reducing how much money goes into it. But again, the government seems to have taken it up, this baton, and carried on with it. I can't believe there won't be any change at all to ISAs. Of course, we don't know. But the budget, I say, is on the 26th of November, and that is when we are probably most likely to hear these things will happen. Could be more twists and turns along the way. We've still got 5-6 weeks until that date comes along. But I would imagine that, then we are going to see some changes in some form, potentially across both cash ISAs and stocks and shares ISAs. One thing we know that isn't likely to change, though, because they reported on this a few months ago, is that reform of lifetime ISAs is unlikely to happen. Although a paper was put forward by the sort of joint Treasury committees, sort of suggesting ways it could be improved, the actual response to that was, no, we're fine with how it works. We're fine with that 25% penalty, which will effectively loses you money if you withdraw cash for any reason other than buying your home or retirement. Fine for how it impacts people on benefits, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't look like it can be changed there at all. So let's assume there are some changes going to come along, announced in the budget. I think it's incredibly unlikely that we'll see them immediately come into effect. I also think it's incredibly unlikely that they would happen on the 1st of January. Again, you look for sort of previous budgets where things have been announced, and sometimes they've been dates that have come in, when there have been changes to stamp duty, for example, on properties in the past, they've got effective immediately. And sometimes let's start it from January. This one, again, feels too complicated to try and do immediately. Almost impossible, in fact, because all the providers would have to change all their existing accounts and limits and measuring and tracking and all those kind of things. And even January, I think, would be too soon because Christmas and New Year are going to disrupt them, right? So the most realistic time that any changes are announced to come into play will be the start of the new financial year on the 6th of April, 2026. Potentially the 1st of April, but generally the financial year is probably the most likely when that's going to happen. So we have got plenty of time, I would imagine, before anything happens in that time, and plenty of time to plan for it. But of course, you never know. So there is certainly an argument right now to look at filling as much as you possibly can of your ISA allowance. If you didn't already do this when I spoke about this back in the spring and again in the summer about these rumours, if you didn't already start doing this, it's worth thinking about it now. Because if you put your money in an ISA now, and let's say the cash ISA is scrapped completely, or you put in more than the amount which is reduced, the allowance is reduced to, if it's reduced in this financial year, at least it's there, it's protected, because the chance of something retroactively being introduced must be near impossible, because it would be so complicated to do and incredibly unpopular. Any changes are most likely to be new money, new deposits going forward. So definitely worth thinking about it. If you've got money right now that you can put into an ISA up to that limit, it's there because it should hopefully be protected year after year after year after year going forward. No changes there. I would maybe err on the side of an easy access cash ISA. You get some really good rates there as well right now. Over on becleverwithyourcash.com/ISAs, we've got the top paying accounts across all the different sorts, so easy access, fixes, stocks and shares ISAs, all different options out there. But go with an easy access one, because that just gives you the money's there. It's in that ISA wrapper, as they call it, which means the returns you get, the interest you get back of it will be tax-free. But you've got that ability then to move it if you want to. You can transfer it into a fixed home ISA or transfer it into a stocks and shares ISA if you want to, because it's already in that wrapper. Or if there aren't any changes and there's a much better available to you elsewhere, and you're not fussed about keeping it in that ISA wrapper, you could always withdraw it at the amount you put in. Obviously, if you put it in a fix, you can't take it out. If you put it into a stocks and shares ISA, there is obviously a risk that the value could fall as well as increase in the short term. So in the short term, I would say easy access ISA for the next sort of 5-6 weeks until we know exactly what's happened on the budget. But obviously, there are other options out there, so you've got to make a decision that is best for you. But let's end on these reforms. If they do happen, whether actually you should be too worried about it. Yes, I know I've just said you may as well put money in your allowance right now, because I think that's worth thinking about. But even if you don't, or you don't have enough money right now to put into ISAs, or you've used your allowance already, although this idea of reducing the cash ISA annual allowance does seem maybe a little bit scary or doesn't seem very fair, in reality, I don't think it's going to impact many people. I think a small fraction of people every year are able to put in £20,000. And a £10,000 cap, again, I don't think will be that different. It's still pretty generous compared to what people get in other economies in terms of that ability to save tax-free. And it's not the only thing. You've also got your personal savings allowance, which we've spoken about before. We've also got premium bonds. Again, your returns there. The personal savings allowance is up to £1,000 or £500 of interest every year is tax-free, depending on your earnings rate. And premium bonds, any prizes you get are tax-free as well. There are a number of ways that you can still do this. I mean, just as a sideline, of course, personal savings allowances, premium bonds, starting rate for savings, any of these other things, they could obviously also be reformed, but there are options out there right now. So for most people, with the amount of money they can save, or the amount of money they need to have saved, because remember, you don't need to have huge amounts of money in cash savings anyway, unless maybe you've got something big on the horizon, or maybe you're retired and you're trying to manage things in cash more. Most of the time, you're fine, right? Even a £10,000 limit would be fine. And yeah, some big earners, or those who are windfall, they might miss out on that ability to put money in cash ISAs, but it seems incredibly likely that the overall £20,000 ISA allowance will remain. So there's still going to be the ability to put some of those higher earnings, or those windfalls, or whatever it might be, in an ISA wrapper and get returns. In this case, probably it will be dividends, or the difference in kind of hopefully profit that you make from investments, tax-free as well, because they'd be within an ISA. And if you are someone who would want more things in cash because of the risk, there are investment vehicles out there where effectively work like cash. Now, they're not necessarily the easiest thing for newbies or even middle experienced people to find and investing, but they're there. So unless rules came in that said you couldn't put your money into a money market fund in an ISA, you could still get the equivalent of cash and that security with those tax-free returns. So overall, I think for most people, this isn't going to be too big of a deal based on these current rumours. Perhaps something that might be more disruptive are those suggestion changes to the stocks and shares ISA, with this potential requirement that some of your investments are in stocks and shares, UK stocks and shares and equities. I think it just makes it more complicated. And it all makes it more complicated, doesn't it? Rather than having simplification, which people have been asking for ages, to make it much easier, this all makes it more complicated. I think that's where it's potentially more of a problem. But again, not too much, I think, to worry about right now. Still rumours. Getting close to the event, getting stronger that these rumours probably could become the case, but we still don't know for certain. So don't panic. Don't do anything too reactionary. But if you can put money in a cash ISA right now, it will give you that little bit of security, that little bit of protection over the next couple of months, just in case there are more extreme changes. Remember, if you do want to find the best paying ISAs or even non-ISAs, head over to becleverwithyourcash.com/savings. My name's Andy Webb. Thanks so much for watching. Check out these videos here for more ways to make the most of your money.